dear design leaders, future thinkers and change makers around the world. I'm Ekaterina, co-founder of Future London Academy, and welcome to our cozy and very, very human conversation today about very important topic of design and AI. We will be diving into all sorts of interesting things about the tools for designers in the age of AI, about the role of creativity in design when the world is shifting so fast. And I could not find a better guest to discuss all these topics than Charles Migos. Charles is an incredible design leader with over 30 years of experience across multiple companies that you all heard of. He has been leading teams and working with incredible brightest minds like Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive. He was a VP of product design at Unity and held design management positions at Apple and Microsoft. And right now, he decided to step away from incredible big companies and start his own venture, which is called Intangible AI, which is a wonderful, magnificent tool for designers and creatives who work in the world of 3D. That is more intuitive, makes it much easier to collaborate, and kind of steps away from text prompting into visual collaboration. Obviously, it's already been a huge success. It has been backed by some of the most well-known funds like A16Z Speedrun, Crosslink Capital, and Industry Angels. So it is my pleasure to welcome Charles today to our conversation. Welcome, Charles. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Katerina, for that wonderful introduction. I'm doing excellently. Thank you for having me on the show. And as always, I'm such a fan of your program and happy to participate in all facets of it.
Well, we are very happy to have you because we have many questions. I was just reading through all the questions that our community submitted. There is a lot of confusion about the future, the current, the processes, the AI, so many things. But before we dive into very practical things about what should we do, which tools we should use, what does it mean for the design process, and what does it mean for design leadership and creative leadership, I would like to start with a bit of reflection on your career, because you worked with some of the most incredible companies in the field of design that defined what design is and defined what the role of design is for a lot of us. Reflecting back on this 30 plus years of work, and I know you worked at Apple on first touchscreen interaction. So that was a groundbreaking time as well when, again, a new technology came about and the role, again, of design and design has changed. Do you think that the change and the shift we see right now with AI and AI tools is monumental, never happened before, or it's just another shift that kept happening with Photoshop, with interactive screens, with touchscreens, whatever? There were many shifts throughout the years and it's just another one.
Well, I'll state that what we're experiencing today is unlike anything that we've experienced before, but there are some comparables out there. And the two that I can cite are the dawn of the internet era, right? Where the moment that the World Wide Web went visual, prior to that, we had had a desktop publishing revolution, right? Where digital tools were replacing the conventional analog methods for doing graphic design and the reproduction of graphic design. So with tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Quark, and things of that era, you no longer needed to know how to physically cut out Letroform and paste it up as a physical layout and then have a photographic reproduction artist take a picture of that so a print plate could be generated from it. All of those things were obviated. They were no longer necessary. Typesetting also as part of that wasn't necessary because you had these tools. And these tools were perfect for that new modern method of graphic design. But then something interesting happened, which is the World Wide Web happened, and the World Wide Web went visual. It was this new emergent medium that required visual content to populate and communicate against it. And what did everybody use? They used these desktop publishing tools, and they started to use them in ways that were different from what they were designed for, right? Photoshop was a digital editing tool, but it turns out you could put an image in there and some graphic elements and some type blocks, and suddenly you had graphic design. And if you needed more precise control, there was Illustrator, and you were just needing to learn how to work with Bezier curves, and you could suddenly do a whole lot all by yourself. And then those tools became the standards for populating the World Wide Web and ushered in a new era and a new domain area of design, which we call user experience design today. Formerly, it was HCI, it was led by cognitive psychologists, but now you had people of more artful kind of design backgrounds, being able to approach these tools, and became our first generation of user experience and then product experience designers for digital applications. So I think about those things as being a lot like what we're experiencing today. And nobody knew what to make in that moment, just like nobody knows what to make in this current moment. But as I said, it's an order of magnitude more. The seismic shift here is significantly greater than either of those two things, although, of course, internet gets very close, right?
Love the comparison with kind of Photoshop, Illustrator era and how we use these tools for what it definitely wasn't intended. And Photoshop was the standard for web design for a very long time, even though it wasn't the best tool whatsoever. And I love bringing memories of Quark Express and Bezier curves. I felt like I haven't heard these words for a while, so thank you for bringing all the memories. I would love to hear then what maybe stayed the same throughout these years if we experienced this shift and now it's the biggest shift ever to do with the role of design and the process of design. What do you feel like stays the same in terms of who designers and creatives are and what do they bring to the process and how they work?
Oh, the fundamentals, like I will just state this outright. I've always been an ardent believer in design methodology, design process, and what we contemporarily call design thinking, right? I can quote you Tim Brown up the wazoo, and I think that gentleman in his book, Change by Design, more or less nailed what design should mean. And in that book, he makes the quote, design is too important to be left to designers. And I 100% believe that that is true. Because anybody that contributes and impacts the end result in some measure, some way, shape, or form, is by definition a designer of that product, a designer of that tool, and it is going to be felt and experienced by someone at the end of that process. So what does not change here is the designer's very important role in storytelling around the opportunity, and that opportunity needs to take into account the precise business needs of the company they work for and the company they're trying to provide services to, the target personas or profiles with whom against whom you're going to be designing experiences and workflows to try and facilitate their work and their success in that work. Having a deep understanding and a curiosity about technology so you can maximize the benefit of technology so those people can win at what they do. You know, design is not art. Design is problem solving at its fundamental level. So our method, our practice, canonically won't change, and it shouldn't change because it's designed to inform not just design, but everyone design is practiced for on what the opportunity is and align people on what the outcome can be. So that part does not change.
I love that we still have some humanity left in us for designers. And as you said, understanding the users, the humans, having empathy for who we're designing for. I think that fundamentally will never go away because at the end of the day, the final users are humans. Though there is a trend of designing for algorithms now. So we'll talk about that maybe separately of at the end of the day, everything is now read by algorithms. So who knows who we're designing for. So let's dive into then the most important part of today's conversation. Seriously, we had hundreds of questions about what should we do in this world of AI tools where literally every single day there is a new best ever, most efficient, groundbreaking tool coming out at us through the LinkedIns and newsletters that we always see.
We talked about the groundbreaking best. That's the one I did.
It is a groundbreaking. It definitely Intangible AI is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
But you're on both sides as a design leader and the person who designs tools. I feel like you're in a very unique position to actually comment on where are we with tools, and specifically if anyone's sitting right now and feels like I'm overwhelmed with how many tools are out there, what are maybe the principles to look at selection of tools if someone wants to start using some AI tools but feels like I can't choose from 500? What are some principles that someone should implement to choose an AI tool for their work?
Yeah. So as individual designers, I think my first words are just to encourage you to try and try anything. Right. But I would invite people to try using that framework that I just claimed is not going to change. Right. So as we are designers engaged in discovery, well, if you employ ChatGPT or you employ Anthropic's Claude, the ability to source, collate, synthesize, and analyze data is incredible. And if you really want to inform your design decision and inform design practice and inform the projects that you're working on, starting with these tools to do that as part of the discovery phase is a great way to start. And if you're doing field research work and you're using standard design and research methodologies as part of that, being able to feed that data in to these very same systems so that they can conduct analysis. And in my own usage, I've discovered insights that I myself have missed and correlations to data that I might have missed. And that's at the very beginning part of our process. The tail end of the process, the same rules apply for like analytics. We use PostHog for when I'm doing in my startup. And the AI capabilities around analyzing that engagement data for our end users are a godsend for anyone who really wants to understand, do I have great product market fit? Am I solving the problems for these users? And again, we use our traditional UX research method and we use our design method as the core of it, but these tools can collapse what used to take us months into literal afternoons now. So first thing is get busy, get started. The second thing I would recommend is doing the discovery phase, so start there. The third thing I would recommend is pilot, right? So you don't want to be disruptive to your overall process nor that of your teams. So try and find a project that is contained enough for you to do experimentation with these tools and see what you get. I've had enormous success with, as I mentioned, Anthropic Claude, and I'll get into reasons why I chose that, and also ChatGPT, and to a lesser extent, I'm starting to plug in with Gemini 3. I chose those tools because they fit very neatly into two areas of need for me. So with Claude is the best, I think, analyzer of data and has the best writing skills relative to the data that you input and process through it. So I like it for that. But we also use Anthropic as part of our agentic architectures and technology infrastructure. So I wanted to use something that was common, right? I needed to understand how it worked and it functioned to understand how we apply it as technology. So think about it from those two frame points or points of view as well, right? Where make a choice around the tech that actually complements a process or some part of your business in some way, so it actually informs it. That's the other reason that I mentioned I chose Claude. The other one that I use on a daily basis is Figma Make, which is astounding, right? It turns each and every one of us into creative technologists. It's ridiculous. And you're able to experiment and prototype things that would honestly, when I had prototyping teams, have taken them weeks. And instead, I am in a not exactly a vibe coding posture, but I'm in a structured conversation with these AI tools to develop concepts in order to evaluate them, to conduct user tests against, to look at with my team, and that again wasn't possible before. So I'll summarize by saying, like, get started, don't wait. Pick a part of your process where you can actually pilot and demonstrate the impact to yourself, and then be able to talk about it with your teams and try and correlate it to the interests of your design organization and the business that you serve as part of that design organization. Those would be my ways to get started. Oh, well, and fundamentally use your designer foundation, use that framework. Do not change the first principles. Let them be your guide.
I love that you mentioned about starting with curiosity, and I think this is definitely the best way to approach any big shift in the industry, and especially with tools, because there is certain resistance towards any change, and I think suddenly implementing new tools in the process can be tricky. I have the opposite problem when I'm too curious about too many tools, and I subscribe to too many, and I try them all, and I never know when to stop using a certain tool, whether they're showing the promise, should I still using them? Like, what is your, I suppose, assessment? Let's say you do a trial yourself. Would you try it with a team? What would be the process of trying the tool and really assessing after using it that, okay, we should all start using this tool. This is a really good tool for our team, not just for myself.
Yeah, again, I mean, as I mentioned, Claude and Figma Make were obvious choices for us. And for design in general, I think starting to experiment with Figma Make is probably the easiest way to get going. Most of us have proceeds of Figma. It's available right now. It's a ridiculous bargain at this point because they're not really charging for it at the moment. So it's a great time to get your feet wet with it and just try it out. I've also used Cursor. I've also used Lovable, and I use them to do real work and do real things. But they are They don't offer the opportunity to be as integrated as, say, Claude Code does, or Figma Make does, and therefore I stopped subscribing to both of them. I actually still have a Lovable account, but I stopped subscribing to Cursor. So I tried them, I experimented with them, I understood them, but then gravitated towards those tools that offered the best kind of scale advantage for me and for my team and for the company itself.
That's a great example of trying something and assessing whether it is right for the priorities that you have. Let's say you did find a tool. Let's say you are very happy and you're convinced that this is the right tool. Another big problem with any team organization is then convincing everyone else that we should all use one tool because someone else sitting next to you tried this tool and they say, we should use this one, and someone else says we should use that one. So what would be the process of deciding as a team? What would be the process, especially as tools will change very fast? So that might not be a forever 10-year plan of the process, but kind of that's what we should all shift to right now.
Yeah, I think I'll refer back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like this notion of piloting and doing real work matters. Like it's like people are so driven by the novelty of things. We look at our LinkedIn feeds and it's chock-a-block with like, look at this amazing thing I did all by myself in 30 seconds. All right, great. But post novelty, what matters is the quality of the work at the far side. And empirically, you can measure, did we get there faster? Did we get there with higher quality? Were we able to align and understand our creative intent more readily because we use these tools? So pilot, do real work, and measure the results are how you make these determinations, right? It's just kind of standard method. We should all be measurable always, right? Always.
This is great. And you started mentioning collaboration as big part of the creative process compared to, I suppose, the narrative that we are all hearing. We were discussing earlier that there is potentially a wrong narrative around AI, that it's a single person kind of tool, and we should be actually thinking about more collaborative way to do work. So what are your thoughts on what's, I suppose, wrong with the conversation about this? I can do everything on my own now that I have 10 different AI tools that can code, design, and write and everything.
It ignores the fundamental truth of the creative process, and that is that creativity is a team sport. It's not a sport of heroes. It's a sport of divining the right idea and having a full understanding about what the possibilities are, again, relative to the context of use, the domain area, the end users occupying that domain area, who they work with, and what matters at what time, at what point in their process. And again, maximizing the potential of technology to take away all of the friction out of their day-to-day in favor of enabling them to be stronger, better, faster at whatever it is that they do. Their time is valuable to them, in any way that you can return time back to whatever they're actually trying to do and what they actually care about matters a lot, right? And I think the thing that bothers me about, say, generative AI and diffusion models today is it implies that we're all like enamored with the idea of creating our own content, telling our own stories, and feeding that back to ourselves in some ridiculous echo chamber that's around a single human. Who wants that, right? I'm far more interested in enabling, and this is why I chose to found this particular company. I'm much more interested in enabling creatives that are professional, that have real intent, that have spent their lives and careers thinking about how to elicit the right intellectual and emotional response in other human beings. I want the take on generative AI that enables those people to do work better than they ever have been able to before, and to color outside the lines of their own discipline, and to enable from an individual to a team, and from a team to its stakeholders, and from its stakeholders to their clients that they serve, bringing clarity to that process, that creative intent, the potential around it. If you can increase that, then the quality of the product on the opposite side can only get better. The opportunities around technology can only get better. Our ability to transform the space can only get better. And it's not about individuals, it's about teams of people that focus on problem solving.
I 100% agree with you that I think the creativity, we all know that it actually is a collaborative thing, and it's better to have many people in the room coming up with ideas than one single individual. But I suppose AI creates this illusion that there are many other people on the other end of AI who are kind of thinking with you, so you can be on your own. but there is something fundamentally different about humans coming up with ideas versus an engine that uses historical data and, I suppose, things that happen in the past generating ideas. So what do you feel like is the role of designers and how, or design leaders, and how is it shifting right now? Obviously, there is a lot of fear and conversation around it. Will it cheapen the design now that everyone knows that everything can be done fast? That's the expectation. Will designers be not needed, or will it cheapen the, I suppose, the how people see design and creativity? And what can we do as a design community? What would be our role maybe stepping forward in this new era?
Okay, one parting thought on what we were just speaking to. So ideas are cheap. You work with smart people, ideas are commodity. You can be in a group discussion, it's 15 minutes long and generate, dozens of ideas. So the problem is not about idea generation. The problem is understanding what the right idea is relative to the meta idea of whatever you're trying to do, what really matters to be done, right? So what is the role of designer? The way I think about design as a function, the most important role it plays is it is a mirror back to a larger organization about what the opportunity is relative to some context of use. So as we set out, and as first described in a marketing PRD, I don't believe in marketing PRDs, but as first described in a marketing PRD or some business intent, when we stipulated that this was a business goal for us and it was connected directly to the goals of our customers, we went through a process to sort of say what tech, what people, what time frame do we have? Design's job is to play back what that opportunity actually looks like to the larger organization. And usually that means storytelling, and storytelling around contexts of use, scenarios, in order for everyone to understand, yes, this is what we set out to do, or no, not quite. And you can direction set accordingly or drill into certain aspects of the experience. But that foundation, that story, which design is largely responsible for, serves as a framework for understanding the opportunity, and make sure that you're not finding yourself in meetings where will continue to be the case, but raise your hand if you've ever been in a meeting that felt like an opinion party, right? Like, I'll raise my hand, right? And those are the death of true design and the pursuit of truth and beauty and opportunity around design. So whatever design can do to limit that possibility by providing a framework for conversation really improves. So that's how we think about design. I don't think their role changes at all in this. They just get enormous new capabilities and superpowers with the advent of these new generative AI tools, and it still builds against the core of what design is. I don't think that changes.
It's so great to hear that you see kind of role of designers and design leaders in an organization and these facilitators of opportunities. I agree that there are so many skills that designers don't even, maybe not all organizations see as designers bring to the company, like facilitation, like visualizing intangible things, like aligning people around the same purpose and the vision. And I agree that there is even more opportunity now for designers and creatives to step up to more of these types of roles and types of challenges to be more visible within the organization. What would you say is the best way for designers, design leaders, and creatives to approach this challenge when, let's say, they're not doing it yet, and the organization is very much pressuring them to do just faster work, to just kind of minimize the effort, and kind of sees design as less and less as the timeline goes forward? How could someone get out of this circle and really step up into leadership and really driving strategic decisions within the organization?
One of the most important benefits of design method is it encourages you to do your homework up front, right? And to get to a deeper understanding of context and be able to report that context back and what's important within that context relative to the design of some solution. And this has not changed. Lo, these many 30 years where I've been working at these various companies with people much smarter than myself, the only way to guarantee that the right idea can happen is through that thoughtful consideration of here's real data and here's real user context and here's what we understand to be true. It has always been apparent who in the room has that grasp over others. And what you will typically find is even Because as we described this, Ekaterina, we've even before generative AI, we all face that struggle of the make it pretty or the here's my great idea. Would you just make it, you know, palatable for the user? I'm pretty sure it's great. They're going to love it. Just, would you mind retooling it so that that is true? Or I don't understand why it's not working. So please go fix that problem. So that's very analogous to this current state. And what always matters is objective truth. You bring that objective truth to the table. It doesn't matter how bad people's appreciation of a design is wherever you work. I've never met a group of people that weren't honestly in their way trying to do the best thing that they could, right? Yeah, bad actors exist, but very few of them I've encountered in my own career. Most people want to do the right thing. Most people want to do right by their users, and most people will respond to the signal of a core truth and essential truth around the users. So maintaining objectivity relative to them is the beacon for us and for the team and for our function is designed to guide a team in conversation about what we can do for a user. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And it just made me think of so many different areas of, I suppose, where design has the superpower and how can designers start shifting that. I suppose from you being in organizations that are very design driven like Apple and maybe they're more technology driven like Microsoft, how would that change in terms of how you would go around showing this value of design? Again, speaking of research, Apple, again, I'm not sure if you can comment on it, but was very famously never doing the research. It was all about the vision and what I suppose we decided in the room. And it was less about user research and testing and A/B testing and kind of figuring out the truth, but more about kind of what Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive decides to do. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So how would you, I suppose, balance what you said depending on the culture of organization?
Well, interestingly, a real truth about Apple that not many people, that's counterintuitive, is it is very much an engineering-led company. And when you think about who gets up on stage and speaks to the things that Apple has done, until very recently, those were all people of engineering backgrounds, the exception being Johnny, who would appear and spoke very, I think, esoterically about industrial design more than anything else. But everyone else is from an engineering background. And when you're in that company, you observe the tastefulness that exists within engineering. Like they understand the gestalt of Apple as good as anybody that works at that company. And Apple's very careful about the people that it hires into, and that's how it preserves its integrity around design. But so much of that integrity actually comes from the engineering organization. And the trifecta of decision making that happened, at least in my era, was the senior executive leader of that division coupled with the senior engineering leader of that division, coupled with design, were how decisions were actually made. You contrast that with Microsoft, where it is, again, a very engineering-centric organization, but the central role in Microsoft is that of a program manager or a PM. And those PMs typically have engineering backgrounds, and they're taught to pre-specify everything before it gets built. So design, the appreciation for design is very different, but the truth of them being very engineering and technology-centric companies is just that. It's actually true. Katerina, I'm drifting a little bit. Can you bring me back to point?
Sure. We're discussing what's, I suppose, the difference, how to show the value of design and especially design, this new type of design that we're discussing and the role of a design leadership within different cultures, whether it is within Apple, where maybe you need to prove less. Everyone, as you said, even engineers know the value of design. And I suppose, and I, by the way, when I say Microsoft engineer driven, I love Microsoft products. And I feel like there are incredible designers who work there that actually drive incredible innovation within design. But from the outside, I feel like two organizations feel like they have contrasting culture, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, no, no. I think you're quite right about it. And again, one human's experience in a particular era does not the truth of today make, right? So I will say that the thing that was true at Apple is they didn't conduct external research, but they did a lot of internally facing research. And we did a lot of human factors study. We did a lot of end user study internally to Apple, which is using the corpus of Apple employees and never reaching out externally because Apple is very secretive, right? So, and the thing that Apple really did focus on, which would behoove places like Microsoft, is human factors-based research. There is a lot of it is at Microsoft. My experience was pretty qualitative, less empirical, much more context oriented, didn't really focus on actual human factors considerations, anthropometrics, cognitive psychology, ergonomic factors, environmental factors. And Apple does that very, very precisely and rigorously. But otherwise, they were hiring you as a designer for the knowledge that you already had, or as an engineer for the knowledge that you already had. You weren't expected to go out and acquire new knowledge. You expected to be hired with all that knowledge on board, and away you would go. The other thing that was true about Apple was you always designed in high fidelity, because in order to execute at high fidelity, you had to have considered all of the details. We would do wireframes occasionally, but mostly you were looking at final screen or as near to it as you could approximate, so that there was always that understanding of what the end user experience is going to be. It wasn't abstracted away at any point during the process, which was not true at Microsoft and not true at other companies that I worked. So
that's very interesting that you mentioned high fidelity. Do you think that this would potentially, I'm an optimist, will shift? The more organizations will become design driven because we can produce high fidelity prototypes, high fidelity designs now much faster and much cheaper. As designers, not necessarily, again, as design teams using the right tools, we can produce those high fidelity prototypes. Therefore, there is only even more reason for everyone to become like Apple, where everything discussed in the detail, everything is all about, I suppose, every single aspect that design brings rather than just the structure and the engineering.
Yeah, well, look, the rules have changed, right? Like the level of sophistication around like micro pattern design in 2D screen space applications is, way beyond what used to be true at Apple when I worked there 10 plus years ago. And what's brilliant about these tools is you can go there. You can go all the way there, right? And again, that statement of like now every designer can be a creative technologist, a creative technologist, absolutely true. And you can bring just the normal amount of rigor that you would bring for any other part of your role as a designer, and be able to test the theory yourself, create a thing that is testable by users, create a thing that demonstrates intent or potential to the team in a way that simply wasn't possible before. So at Apple II, we did a tremendous amount of prototyping. The prototyping was really expensive, and we had internally developed prototyping tools. Gaining mastery over them was really hard. Everything was abstracted. It was really hard to think in a natural design language kind of way about what you were doing. Everything had to be reduced to like math and some understanding of a tech principle. And that's changed. And that is a fantastic evolution for us.
Let's talk about Intangible, because I feel like you are building something very interesting in the era that we live now, which is design processes changing, and there is so much focus on text to visual or text to something tools, and your tool basically goes the opposite way, and it is very much visual intuitive. And we had a conversation earlier about how there is this, I suppose, misconception about how we think and how we create that current tools are focusing on, which is the interface of speech and text. So how do you think about this problem within the Intangible, and how did you decide to create a tool? What principles did you use when you thought about what designers and creatives need in this current stage?
Yeah, so the first, it's very important for me that we are honest to the actual creative process and the creative mindset as it exists for the individuals, the teams that they work with, their interactions with their stakeholders for review and approval of design direction, their interactions with clients, if it goes to client-facing kind of design. My observations about what was true in the generative AI space was that none of these things seemed to take that into account. It felt like they were sort of imposing a new modality on the way in which we practice and work as creatives. And again, as designers, we're not artists, right? We're problem solvers. We are there to thoughtfully consider myriad factors and choose wisely among them to bring some solution forward that solves a real problem for some person other than ourselves. And it's not pure art in that regard. But even if it is pure art in that regard, there are things that you simply can't express in words. There are things that can't be articulated before they are demonstrated, let's say, right? There is this need to have not just that modality of text to something, but WYSIWYG and direct manipulation and tactility. And that's the part that's missing today. And that's the part that we're bringing into the process. So we serve film industry, we serve creative ad agency space, we serve game development, we serve events design. And the way in which we serve it is we're putting generative AI tools into the right framework and workflows that meet the mindset and the mental models of the creatives in that process. And so everything that we consider in our system honors that and takes that into account. So the way I describe it is like, if any of you are familiar with 3D systems, then hopefully you'll recognize this truth about them. They're deterministic environments. They're not really great for what I would call sketching. You kind of have to know what you're going to create within them before you start creating within them, because they're incredibly sophisticated and complex tools that require an enormous amount of investment just to learn. And then because they're so technical, that's where you sort of need to have a target in mind and then reverse engineer the steps that you need to work through in 3D to realize it. And for 30 years, I've thought that was, for lack of a better word, bullshit. And there was a better way to think about how technology could apply and how it could be humanized, right? And then when you fast forward to today, when we have, these things sitting around in our pockets and they're all like 100 times more capable than the systems I used to design for, 20 odd years ago, there's no excuse for not doing better, right? And the way in which we do better is, again, to be very pure around what matters for the creative process. Now we're taking generative AI and we're making it easy for people to do things in 3D that were very hard, very time constraining, and required a lot of technical knowledge to do. And now people who have no 3D training can do them. And then they can use that 3D representation of a world to control generative AI output, which is a thing that they can't do anywhere else. So the reason that people like our tool and Hollywood loves us right now is because you can place a camera exactly where you want it. You can animate that camera. You can animate the stuff that happens in front of that camera, and you get an exact result on the opposite side. And it's not one that you had to, in a deterministic way, sort of like, well, how do I reverse engineer a prompt to get me that result? It was this nice combination of, I'm going to use words where it makes sense. I'm going to use direct manipulation where that makes sense. And I'm going to get to a point where, aha, I see it. And then I can drill in and provide additional detail around it where I want, when I want. So those other modalities don't do that very well. This set of combined modalities that we're building into our system allows people to work with generative AI in a way that makes sense for them and allows them to do things that they can't do kind of anywhere else. But it's all, again, about the essential truth of who that user is and what she cares about.
I'm so with you that, first of all, on the traditional problems of 3D, I was the early user of 3D Max, and it felt like math, nothing else. It felt like incredibly difficult calculations, and definitely not something where you can be playful and creative and just come up with ideas. And again, like we create in any other space, be more sketchy, be more free flowing. So I'm very happy to see that the industry shifted from that way. But also I agree with your point that speech to or text to visual is just one modality, and I'm definitely not the type of person who can describe in a very precise way what I want to see. I'm much better sketching and drawing and putting things together, and I think that's quite normal for visual people who work in creative or design industry. So I'm glad to hear that there is a shift from just speech or text to something tools into more collaborative and free flowing and just easy tools that we can all use.
Yeah, we're in our best mindsets when we're in a fluid creative state, right? And so we're trying to make sure that in our environment, you're in that fluid creative state for as long as possible, as long as possible. And then when you make that choice for, I see it now, and you want to drill in and focus on it, you can. True for you, true for teams. Yeah.
So would love to speak a little bit about the concerns about AI, because another big chunk of questions that we had before this podcast is about all sorts of IP, copyright issues that we all kind of facing, but also don't know what to do with. So what is your view overall on current state of the copyright and IP within the world of AI? What does it mean for creatives? How should we understand and adapt to it?
Well, first of all, it's a real concern, and it's an important one. I'm human. I come from creative industry. I have many friends that work in creative industry. I've seen the impact of generative AI. I have a personal point of view of whether or not it's acceptable for a model company to scrape the artistic efforts of a variety of designers and artists and directors of films and then encode them into a model that makes it possible for anybody to reproduce what was formerly their art as a purely a style exercise. I don't love that. I don't think that the incumbents thought hard enough or carefully enough or cared enough about the about those people whose work they've usurped. That's me. That's my position on it. And so a lot of people in our creative industry are coming from that point of view, and they hate it. They hate what they're seeing. The challenge is that genie's out of the bottle, and it's never going back. And so the question is, what is the best thing that we can do, all things being equal? Well, the fundamental choice that I've made, say, with respect to the tools that I'm providing is I've yet to meet a designer or a creative that is as vocally against the use of ChatGPT or Claude as they might be for, say, Midjourney or Runway or any of the diffusion model tools, right? They're happy to do that. So in our world, when you are realizing your own ideas, they were always your ideas. We're using large language models to execute against your creative intent, your creative vision, whatever that is. And there's never a possibility for intrusion from someone else into that sphere. That's on one side of the world where you're creating things in 3D. You're telling your story, you're animating cameras, you're animating characters, you're doing all that stuff. Now, on the other side, you do use diffusion models to render, and those models have been trained on other people's work. The best thing that you can do for people is give them choice. So some models are ethical, let's say, and so we're going to provide access to those ethical models, and you can choose to use them. Other people will not have a problem with using Midjourney, and so they shall be able to use Midjourney or Nano Banana Pro or whatever they want in context. Major houses like WPP or Sony Pictures, they're rolling their own models. And so we're trying to be smart in the building of a platform that can plug into any model, including their own, so that they have creative choice. Now, if you are vehemently against it, you can still extract a tremendous amount of value of the system in areas which are, for lack of a better way to say it, morally safe. But then if you choose to, you can go down these territories to use models that you approve of or that the house approves of or that the client approves of. The answer then is in effect choice, providing choice.
This is so good to hear that this was very much an integral part of how you thought of designing a tool, building in ethical consideration. So do you feel like in general, in the future, there will be more and more companies, like you said, WPPs and Sonys of the world already building their own models that are safe and built on their own IPs and therefore more ethical than, I suppose, open source models? Is that the way forward, or will we see some other shift which will help us create this, I suppose, better design?
We're definitely going there, right? Like, I mean, it's almost commodity already, the ability to kind of like train or fine tune a model using your own content. We talked about a variety of tools for designers. You'd asked at one point, what industrial designers might use. Well, the preeminent tool for industrial designers right now is something called Viscom. And in Viscom, apart from it being trained on like standard industrial designers sort of stylized Copic marker sort of illustration or rendering, it's trained on that stuff already. You can actually train it with your own sketches, your own reference imagery, your own mood boards, and get something entirely new on the opposite side. So WPP has already built their own model. Sony Pictures already built their own model, and each of us gets to build our own models too. And that's definitely where the world's going.
So do you feel like it will be easier for individuals then to build their own models? Because right now it seems like a luxury for companies that are big and can afford training their models and all the servers that it requires, versus someone like an individual creative who doesn't have the capacity to do that.
I do it myself using Figma Make, right? And so it's like built my own. We have our design system, and I employ the design system as part of what I prototype in Figma Make. And when I'm coloring out outside the lines because we have new component architectures or a stylized workflow that needs a custom approach, I'm in effect training Figma Make based on the data of Figma files. So that is one example. And in Viscom's case, you're simply saying like, here's a folder full of imagery that's whatever, the mood board, my style, whatever it is. and it will train a model on being able to reproduce it. It's a fine-tuning model. It's some offshoot of some other pre-existing open source model primarily, but it allows you to do exactly that.
And can we trust big companies that if we upload our own data, that's definitely only used for us and no one else?
To tell you, that's a tough question. Can we trust the big companies? I have many friends that work at big companies. I've worked at them myself. I'm not sure, right? It seems like we're unconstrained right now, is the best way to put it. It seems like we don't care as a body of humans. We're just sort of putting it all out there and making use of these things and feeding them full of data through our use. Can we trust the companies? We have to basically come to our own conclusions about what is acceptable to us, just the same way we choose what our privacy settings are in social media spheres. They're not providing a lot of choice on that front right now, but I expect they're going to have to. It'll be legislated.
Love this. Some refreshing perspective on where we are with the world of AI. But would love to kind of finish this part on the future. And where do you see, again, speculation, purely speculation, no one knows where the future goes, especially as we'll dive into all sorts of practical things about tools in a second. They will change in a month, in 2 months, all these conversations will get outdated. But I suppose by you being for 30 years in the industry, literally in the center of some of the most creative companies and most forward-thinking and innovative companies, and now being in the middle of AI revolution, building tools, what do you see maybe that others don't see yet? Maybe it's not far-fetched 100 years in the future, but maybe something that you see that maybe is not discussed on the LinkedIns of the world, on the internets of the world yet.
Yeah, well, as I intimated before, what we're seeing in our LinkedIn feeds is pretty superficial, right? It's like eye candy. It's kind of like everyone is claiming an idea and they're not actually offering a solution around it. It's kind of like, look what I thought of. This is gonna be possible. Put a stake in the ground. It's mine. Who gives a shit? I don't believe in futurism, and I hate it when we as designers are, it's exciting sometimes to do like to speculate about what things can be and to do futuristic concepts of scenarios likely or unlikely. But what we do in our function is material and important, and it requires the rigor of thought and intentionality. And when we bring those things to bear, the future reveals itself to us. And I have been lucky enough in my career to have been a part of pretty transformative things. And I was not the smartest among the people that I got to work with, but you work with smart people and you maintain curiosity around what's possible. Some of that smartness rubs off. And again, that first principles approach to what matters, it is what matters to that end result, and that human around that end result is always my guide. So what do I see right now? I see the truth around what film creation is, what game creation is, what creative development is that isn't being honored. And I see a potential for us to embrace principles and approaches around collaboration and communication of ideas that start to stretch beyond the one-for-one interaction that we have with these systems and their modalities into group-based contexts where we can amplify our own thinking and enrich in what's possible because we are doing that. That's what I see. If I permit myself one bit of futuristic thought around, say, what I'm doing, is that the mediums are changing. There's not the same demand that people of my generation had for, say, feature films. And it was every weekend you would go and see one or two movies, right? And that's not true for the younger generations today. They're consuming a lot more media in many more forms than was true of Gen X and even of millennials. And the kinds of content that they're looking for is very different in its feeling, even though the IP is the same. So you might like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you might enjoy their films, but one of the most brilliant things that, say, Epic did with Fortnite was to tie in a wonderful game with a social context and a timely one. So the way that they would tie in like Marvel Cinematic Universe, or they had the Travis Scott experience, or they had the DJ Marshmallow experience, was a first glimpse into what that future space might be, where the consumption of media is way more collaborative and way more interactive and different. And as a fan of these things myself, I'm looking for new ways to explore my fandom in them today. And generative AI is unlocking amazing new potentials in storytelling and form of story, in addition to helping us do, our work in better ways than we were able to before. So I don't know if that's a satisfying answer, but that's what I can see. But I'm just going to maintain, man, design is important. Do not forget how important design as a function is. Do not forget how important design first principles are. They can always be a beacon and a guide, even in the most transformative times of which we are all finding ourselves today. Yeah, within which we are.
Yes to that, and yes to more power to design in organizations and businesses in the world as well. I suppose, what are the new opportunities for designers now? As I suppose there is this kind of shift for a lot of designers to figure out, again, trying different AI tools, how to do things faster, how to do things better. But I feel like that's almost like the wrong pathway. We will all figure out how to do things faster. We will all figure out how to do things better using AI tools. But as you said, we are not really utilizing the real opportunities of AI for creativity, like storytelling, like this narrative-based things. So what kind of problems, I suppose, designers should be solving right now instead of how can we do our work faster?
Yeah, again, it's always around how do we bring more clarity to what we're trying to do, right? Like that is basically it. That's the one. If I have to pick a razor, that's the razor I'm going to pick, right? Like how do we bring more clarity to what we're trying to do and why it matters to us, to someone that we're trying to serve. It's not a rush to efficiency, it's a rush to better outcomes. It's being able to be very outcome focused as you make these choices around your own process and the tools that you use within them, and what you encourage your teams to be using and how they are using it together as a group. That will matter most. Again, the outcome is the only thing that matters. Make smart choices to enable that outcome and have better outcomes is the way I continue to think about things.
Should we have more fun in the process? I suppose that the creativity was my concern with any efficiency. Is like creative process used to be long for a reason, because it actually brings you some pure joy of creation. And as soon as we start doing it faster, it almost takes away the joy that we actually had. So how can we enjoy the creative process more than now that we have more of these tools?
Well, look, it's one human's experience of there was the moment before I tried using these tools intentionally and the moment after. And when I realized the power of Figma Make, I had a holy shit moment, right? Where it's kind of like, wow, man, there's so much I can do that we can do better because we have this integration with a standard designer toolkit and a standard for our whole design industry. So just try, right? Like get started. And I had that very visceral response to like, wow, I cannot believe it was that easy to do. I basically architected. So right now, if you go and use my tool, believe me, it's not a bastion of design right now because it's not intended to be. It's intended to prove theory around technology and workflows with people that know what they're doing. And we had a lot to explore in a very deep proprietary tech stack with the community before we could go like, yeah, we've got it. We understand how this tech works, and now we're going to package it in a different way. And now we're packaging it in a different way. I was able to model that whole experience in like a weekend with real richness and sophistication, the part that we call craft, which is another word that sets me off at times. And it was there, and my ability to just say like, okay, here's the light and the dark mode, and here's the transition animations. It's all in this prototype. By the way, I had the prototype declare itself. I'm like, on this page, go and put all the components with all the associated data and markup there, and it did it. Like that stuff used to take weeks. I'm here for it. Yeah, I'm like, thank you, Figma. Thank you, Figma Make. Go, Dylan. I'm a fan.
Great. Well, yes, to Figma Make. We'll dive into actually the technicalities of how using Figma Make and everything in a second, because people have lots of questions. And I'm also conscious that these questions might become, again, or those answers rather become outdated within a week, 2 weeks, month. And we always try to provide the most value in the moment, but also in the longer future. But would love to go to the practical level of everything that people are asking, because there are many questions. So, let's start with the first question from Shale. So Shale is asking, how would you set up a small creative team to use Figma Make efficiently? And what is the ideal number of designers on a single project?
Well, it's always relative to the project itself, and the scope of the outcome at hand is the first thing. So, you size accordingly. If you have, say, a team of three, and you've got some specialization of roles where someone feels a little bit more UX-y and systems oriented, another feels much more visually oriented, and maybe you've got a generalist profile somewhere in the mix. Well, you've already got the right mix of things to start experimenting with something like Figma Make against those three dimensions of design pretty easily, right? Where the ability to kind of like think through system and architectural considerations, those that have bearing on what the end product experience is for that systems oriented HCI biased UXy person, is astounding today. The visual designer no longer has to redline everything or create like an exhaustive list of variables handcrafted each way so you can have these style sheets. You still have to do that, and you have to have rigor around those things, but you can use these automated systems to generate most of that stuff and to do derivations. So you got a great light mode, cool. Can you do the dark mode derivations for me? And you'll get an amazing starting point for that stuff. And then that generalist, they are in possibly the best of all possible positions. The generalist designer profile, that classic agency profile, let's say, of people who are dangerous at product level thinking, business thinking, product experience thinking, and they're strong visually, man, their time has come. Their ability to do things and be very descriptive and complete and thorough, and to be able to complete the thought is unprecedented. So that generalist profile of design, I think, yeah, is probably going to be the strongest profile of design that we see moving forward. But I would also encourage that we do more of the HCI side of house too, because I am not seeing enough human factors considerations. People, bring that into your thinking. It's very important.
And what
Perception, cognitive sciences, all that good stuff. Don't forget on that stuff. Don't forget about that stuff. Yeah.
And what would you recommend someone to learn to become this generalist? Let's say someone is currently very UX product focused, came from this background, understands user research, understands product design, but maybe is lacking, because there's so much you can learn. So what are other areas you would start expanding your kind of T-shape into?
Well, I would point to your program, right? What you teach for design leadership is the importance of business consideration, right? When design is behaving badly, it's because it's over idealizing around some example of end user. And we can get a little bit religious about it at times where that's not appropriate. We have to, if we are being responsible designers, take fully into account, why are we in this business anyway? This company that I work for, how do I maximize the potential for it? How do we maximize the potential for the business considerations of the customers that we serve? How do I maximize the potential around the workflows that I'm crafting for some human that's part of that overall process? Like, that's the stuff we need to care about. And if you're not caring about that stuff today, that's where it starts. And then what you'll instantly find is if you broaden your horizons of thought in that way, you're going to see obvious places to start using these tools, and they're amazing capabilities for extraordinary outcomes. So, yeah, I think it
Well,
starts there.
thank you for highlighting our Design Leaders program. Definitely anyone who is interested in more C-level positions. Obviously, I'm biased, but it is the best currently on the market. So we're very proud, and Charles is very kind to teach one of the modules there. So anyone who joins the program will learn a little bit of wisdom from Charles as well. Would love to go into a bit of a nitty-gritty detail about more tools. We had so many questions from different types of designers about the tools that they're using. So let's see if you have any perspective on particular tools. What AI tools should I use as CAD industrial designer?
So again, the one I can point to, I'll be honest, I'm not like I haven't put my hands on SolidWorks or ProEng in a million years, so I don't know what they are doing. I know that Autodesk did a lot of work with machine learning based procedural and algorithmic based design in the past. So go take a look at that stuff. But the one tool I can say today is an absolute godsend is Viscom. Viscom is amazing for the ideation phases of industrial design. And it allows you to go from your own sketches to a 3D printable model or a 3D approximation that you can bring into Rhino and start using straight away. But again, I don't know what Rhino's doing. I don't know what these other real CAD CAM systems are doing nowadays. I'm sorry.
I think that's a great places to start. Any other AI tools that you haven't mentioned, maybe that help you optimize your business work, maybe not design work, but just in general, your daily life, anything that you do that's maybe not super well known or maybe well known that help you with your work and life?
Yeah, so the ambient note takers, not the ones that reside as fake people in our Zoom meetings, but the ones like Granola that listen passively are amazing tools, right? Like if you're doing a stakeholder interview or you're doing some field work, your ability to maintain direct eye contact and actually follow the conversation precisely and follow up on the exception or why did you say that? Why is that a pain point for you in your process? Is super important. And when you have these AI note takers that are handling all of the note taking tasks for you, your ability to maximize those interactions is just great. So those kinds of tools are again a godsend for design practice and UX research.
Love it. Any others that maybe didn't get a mention today, apart from Claude's, ChatGPT's, and Figma Make and Granola?
Well, I mean, there's so many amazing, like it's ridiculous what's possible. Like the nano banana stuff is just like, man, hard to even wrap your head around what the potential is because it's ridiculously good. I mean, it takes any subtle context and can actually do something with it. It's really nuts. So I'm like you hanging on by my fingernails at times, trying to absorb and digest the new day-to-day capabilities of all of these systems. So again, I think we've talked about the ones that definitely matter most to me. If I have any other further call outs, I'll have to do it after the fact.
Great. Let's dive into more questions about AI from our lovely community. We have to think and be aware as designers about AI and gender bias, like Laura Bates mentioned in her book, The New Age of Sexism, how the AI revolution is reinventing misogyny. What do you do on gender bias in your work? Let's start with a hard one. Why not?
Well, look, it's a real thing. I think the way I approach this at say Unity, where I led design, is number one to embrace that truth. And the world has seemingly moved on from a focus on DEI. I don't see any sense in that. I think maximizing people's potential is what we always need to be in the business of as leaders. And if you're recognizing that self-advocacy can only get individuals to a certain point, and it's the role of leadership to maximize the potential and the outcomes of teams of people and the individuals that they're comprised of, then you care and you lean in and you compensate in ways that kind of make sense. You don't do it, and I try to do it in a way which is again outcome focused. Let's give you a set of unfair advantages in your role so you can outperform and you will clearly distinguish yourself because that's true. And so doing direct one-on-one work as a leader is the way that I address that. There's an affect that I have that you probably caught a couple times in this conversation is that when I'm referring to an end user, I will always say she. And that serves two purposes. Number one, it reminds us all of this particular issue. And the second thing, arguably the more important one, is that I'm not talking about myself, right? Where the biggest crime in design is to be self-referential. I mean, we do it, of course, but our job is to be as objective as possible and to encourage objectivity from everyone that we work with. So that is one of the ways that little affect helps in that regard. But when I left Unity, the top tier of leaders that I left in my place, and the head of design was an amazing designer, happens to be a woman that I worked with for many years, and I took that approach to developing her career to make sure that she could stand in that position afterwards. So true for every cultural denomination, true for every gender. It's just something we should do.
What do you think on the theory that to make AI more diverse, we as diverse community should use more of AI because at the end of the day, it learns from its users. So the more, I suppose, we will stay away from AI, the more it will learn from the same types of users.
Yeah, that's the problem with AI is it's an echo chamber, right? And it reflects the people that have collected and collated and been responsible for the internet at large, and predominantly men, predominantly white male. And you see that. I am tired of seeing like coquettish, like sexified content in my LinkedIn feed. I think it's horrible, to be honest with you. And I hate the examples that it sets for my own daughter, right? Like we need to be thinking, I don't know, much more maturely about it. And there's a lot of work, a lot of row to hoe for us. I think it starts with us. We have to be a united front. We have to continue to push for what matters and not to do it. The problem is if it smells idealistic, then it'll be ignored. If it's connected with business outcome, it will be honored. So try to contextualize things in ways which are meaningful for business, and you'll have success.
I so agree with you that we as designers should push the ethical and sustainability or whatever agenda we feel like is needed, and it is needed through the lens of business because it is the easiest way to push it and make actually companies change. We actually published the report on the role of chief design officers and overall design in the boardroom, and that beyond the impact of business and finance and everything else that design can bring, there are a few things that are very important that we should be advocating as designers, which is kind of ethics, which is diversity, which is collaborative environments and things that are very natural to us as creatives from the first day we started our jobs. And now that we're raised to leadership positions, we should keep those qualities integral to any leadership team in any boardroom. And if we won't do it, no one else will. And at the end of the day, we are all using the products of the companies that we work in. So we better bring all of these great qualities that we have as a design and creative community to the top level to make sure it's actually better for all of us as a humanity and society.
I'm going to connect one. I'm going to build on that just a tiny little bit. It connects with something you asked me earlier. So, no, the theoretical limit of what generative AI before it reaches general intelligence stages is the zeitgeist. Like that's kind of like the asymptotic limit of what it can do. Humans are different. Humans demand change. Every organism on this earth demands change, if you believe in evolutionary theory, right? And we as humans are the best example of that. Who's going to push past the zeitgeist? Who's going to push into uncharted territories? It's going to be humans. Why? Think about our social fabrics, how we are informed by music and media and the environments that we find ourselves within, our cohorts as designers, our cohorts as lovers of music, our cohorts as fans of art that we all love and enjoy. There's no AI system in the world that can synthesize that stuff. And we can't even as humans synthesize that concretely, but we can certainly viscerally project past it. And we are going to be guided by that innate sense, and our technologies are going to be guided by that innate sense. So the more we adhere to these human goals, the more impact we're going to have on these technologies as they continue to emerge. So it's not a done deal, but recognize that they have their limits and recognize the role of humans and us as a special class of humans as designers in this process around technology. We will be hugely impactful and can change the world.
Oh, yes, to that. And I do believe that the imagination, the creativity, all these very human things are the ones that will be the change makers of the future because everything else, everyone has access to. Everyone has access to ChatGPT. Everyone has access to all the tools, but our personal imagination, our own creativity, it's something that is very unique to us. So therefore, us as creatives and designers are the ones who can produce something that hasn't been produced yet, because we are the only holders of that, and we should definitely maximize that. What do you think on how the eye of the consumer will change now that anything visual can be possible, and how could that influence the way we consume visuals?
Well, I'm not quite sure. Again, it's like I'll point to the novelty. People are going, isn't it amazing that the system can do this? Point in fact, it is, right? Of course, it's astounding. But don't fool yourself. Like that wasn't intentional, like or was semi-intentional. It was sort of a proof of concept or whatever. Like real work will happen, and real work can't be. I would say like all facets of the work cannot be replaced by generative AI and one person driving it. If you're making a piece of architecture, well, you're not going to generate that, right? But it's still going to be a function of methodological approaches and proceduralism as expressed in 3D to actually define an architectural development or a manufactured product or any story that you're going to tell kind of around those things. So the eye of the consumer, I think right now she's sort of like us, amazed at all of the possibility. Yeah, the real work is going to carry through, right? They're like everyone looks at what World Labs is doing and is like, it's amazing, I can make my own game. Well, no, you can create a G-splat, a giant G-splat, and run around in it like that's a game, but that's not what games are, right? Like games are multiplayer experiences with emergent qualities and the ability to interact with things, and there are very complex systems around all of it. And the reason that we bought our Switch 2s to play games, and Nintendo has its own game engine with its own opinionated game systems, and it wants that to last for 10 years. World Labs isn't going to change that in the next 5 years, and probably not in the next 10. So what it can do is amazing, but don't kid yourself. There is a lot of great stuff that we can do right now. So my entreatment for the group is to not focus so much on the novelty, to focus on what's possible, and then maximize for what's possible today. Look at the new tech, think about systems and conventional things, combine those things, solve real problems, and then the consumer interest will follow.
What do you think about AI music and AI movies, and like some AI, I'm not a musician, but some AI music, especially when they unfortunately utilizes the work of real artists and kind of create new genres and new styles. It's very impressive. Where you're on with AI generated art in general?
Well, look, I mean, the ability to kind of like, here's an example piece of music, give me my version of that. That's background audio tracks. It's the things that you used to spend like $500 for a volume set of like stock media of whatever kind, and then you would just roll it behind whatever video production or whatever. I kind of think about it like that. You can get things which are very sophisticated and nuanced out of AI. Unfortunately, it's appropriating a lot of prior art as part of that, but it can do astounding things. If you think about it for audio in the realms that I occupy with the in the markets that I'm trying to serve, it's not just about music. It's about what music is soundtracks, yes, ambient sounds, specific and precise sounds that would normally be done by Foley departments. Like those things are easy to be generated today, and so I believe in that. So back to the topic of AI as art, I've actually seen some emergent aesthetic that couldn't actually be done any other way. So it's happening. It's The stuff that tends to get the most airplay are the things which are kind of like rotely derivative. Like if you go and watch traditional linear broadcast television and you look at the commercials that are part of that, I abandoned that sphere long ago. But if ever I want to watch a sports game, obviously I'll have to see it. If I'm in a hotel room, I'll have to see them. There's no need for like a full production story behind those things anymore. Generative AI can absolutely give you a Toblerone commercial, right? If it's not a particularly artful one. But for anything else, anything that has real artistic voice and value, it's going to require craft. It's going to require thought, and that thought will be, I think, obvious and evident in the work. So the fact that you can hallucinate all these fantastical things, and it's like being on mushrooms constantly when you go into these systems and looking at the product of their work. Visually astounding, but not meaningful yet. But I have seen some aesthetics emerge which are fresh and new. And I think the next generation of creatives that are actually learning their skills with these generative AI tools, they're going to reveal it to us. We're just not there yet. We're kind of in the, remember like the early days of iPhone, like the virtual lighter or the virtual beer or the accelerometer based fart machine that apps that used to be on the iPhone. That's where we are, right? Like and what it's going to become, who knows? But I'm here for it, and I'm starting to see signals that there'll be a new art form, there'll be a new medium around it, and it will be something different and fresh and valuable.
On the note of AI art, a shout out to Luba Elliott, an incredible curator of AI artists who has been doing meetups for creative AI community for 15 or more years when AI wasn't a thing. And speaking of aesthetics, it's incredible actually to see how that community was generating this very different type of art and still is generating very different type of art, which as any art is bizarre and wonderful and uniquely personal. But in terms of kind of giving a new space for creativity, there is definitely something that can be just unique to AI and doesn't need to replace what currently has. It can be just its own, same as what happened with digital art. And
100%, right? It's like not everyone has an appreciation for Mark Rothko because it's all perfectly abstract and it's full of actually cognitive and perceptive theory. That's what drives all of his work. But you can't tell that by looking at it. And if you don't study or are not a fan of modern art, you'll miss that point and go like, who's that idiot? My 3-year-old could do that to do that art. Kind of the same rules apply here. Like, so people that did algorithmic art or procedural art, they're asking real questions about the nature of data and media, and it carries in art. That's what makes art art and not decoration. A lot of people, though, what they're doing is purely decorative.
I wish we had another hour to speak. What is art and what is not? What defines that something is beautiful? I heard on one conversation that any art, everything is art, just some is good and some is bad. So everything that is produced technically can be art. It's just a question of how good it is. Would love to just spend the last few minutes talking about your reflection on design leadership overall throughout your career, because it felt like you had incredible different parts of your life where you had to learn a lot about who you are and what your role is within the organization or within design process, from being a leader within company to now being a founder and leading the team. Would love to hear any reflections that you had on design leadership overall and your role. What lessons did you learn in kind of these different parts? What did you change that made you a better design leader at each stage, moving from designer to design leader, and then moving from design leader within the organization to a designer founder?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably three things. And the first of them was that recognition of where I was over idealizing, you know what I mean? Like ringing that bell around what's usable and what's not, and encouraging everyone to think in very sort of superficial ways about what usability is, where usability is an empirically measurable state. There are criteria that do not change, and not all of them matter equally. And you should understand them well enough to know to apply them where it matters against systems that are going to be used every day and systems that are used infrequently. And you have to be able to remember what you did before and get up to speed to do what you're going to do or whatever. So those kinds of considerations was where it started, right? Realizing that it's greater than you, right? It's not about you and your talent. Yeah, we all want to make a name for ourselves. We all want to be recognized for our brilliance and our talent. But the first most important step is getting over yourself and understanding the importance of the design function that you represent. Step number one. Step number two is incorporating the business thinking into what you choose to do, right? Because the struggle for any company is always around focus. And you and your role in design, I think, plays a very essential role in maintaining focus on what matters. And that set of factors around the business of what you're trying to do and why really matters and should inform design decisions. You should be able to speak to them in what you're doing. So that was the next leveling up. Now, as I mentioned, when you do your homework, it's always clear to people. So if you're thinking about things in a non-precious way, you're thinking about business considerations, and you are bringing an actual perspective on the end user with real data behind them, quantitative or qualitative, now you're in a position to be very impactful in the organization that you're operating within, and that's where leadership starts. And all leaders, there's this kind of shift in this, and there's like I experienced it too in my youthful days, that arrogance of youth, where I'm like I'm not recognized enough, I'm not rewarded enough for my talents and my impact. And maybe that's true, and maybe that's not. But I'll tell you, the people that have been most impactful as leaders of any kind, they're the ones that simply were trying to do the best thing possible and encourage the people around them to do the best thing possible and involve them in doing the best thing possible. And that's leadership. And when I would survey for leader profiles in my own companies and in my own teams, I would always look for the people that were leaders already. And they were leading already because they focused on what mattered. And what mattered was, of course, that outcome and what would be most impactful relative to that outcome. These are the leaders. Those are the leadership qualities I wanted to see, and they were always demonstrated to me before the promotion, not after. Um, Other people have different philosophies around that. And even as I was saying, like, we need to develop people's careers and be very attentive to their careers on a one-on-one basis. That's always the way I thought about it: merit and the demonstrated impact of a unique individual for leadership purpose. Now, if you're doing all those things, you're enabling people around you. You will find yourself applying design method in different ways. So where you might have been responsible for solutioning and putting together, wireframes, comps, flows, prototypes, you're now maybe dealing with human elements, and you're trying to deal with the mix of talents that are best suited for a particular design uh, program task that has to be accomplished in a certain time frame. So you think about, again, all of those same things. What's the intent? What matters? Why? And for whom? And now you're making choices about the humans you're going to involve in that process. Um, and then again, if you're being very smart about not just your function, the other thing I'd recommend is, of leadership, number one, the thing is, you don't have problems as leaders anymore. Like, when you're a leader, everyone else's problem is your problem. And it doesn't stop with design. Your engineering leader partner, their problems, they're your problems too. Your product leader partner, their problems are your problems too. And helping them solve their problems and learning to speak in their voice is how we win the seat at the table as design function. And it's not about winning a seat at the design table. It's just appreciating that's how we get to great. And so in order to get to great, that's how we should operate.
This is brilliant advice to wrap these insightful and deep and rich conversations that we had. Before I let you go, we have one last question that we'll ask all the guests that come on our podcast, which is a bit philosophical. Charles, if you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
Wow. I think the thing that I appreciate right now is we're all very self-interested in a way that I don't like to see. And so I want to see much more empathy and cross consideration kind of at the societal level. And as we are guardians of design practice and design function, obviously our job is to make sure that we don't trend that way either, right? Like, there's a greater good to always be considered. There is the fellowship of the team that we work within. There is the consideration of the end user and the potential around what they are doing. The world needs demonstrations of why that matters. So I want to see more of it in the world, and therefore I want to see more of it kind of from us. And also less futurism, more pragmatism, please, because the future is the thing that reveals itself to us. It isn't predicted.
Brilliant answer and great advice. Thank you so much, Charles, for all of your wisdom, knowledge, practical advice, tips, and just reflection on life, AI, leadership, and everything in between. It has been such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being with us. Any last words for our community? Anywhere people should find you? What people should search for? Where should they find Intangible AI?
Yeah, I mean, go take a look at what I'm doing, of course, but I'm here for this community. So please find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out at any time. There's a large volume of communication in my role as a founder and doing what we're doing, but I will always find time to get back. Might not be super responsive, but I'm here for any questions you have. Any way I can enable our design community, I'm here for it. There's a reason I'm extended faculty with the Katerina's program. It's because I believe in it deeply, and I'm here for it. So please find me online, and thank you all for your time. Thanks for caring.
Thank you so much, Charles. If you find anything insightful, helpful, useful, provocative, challenging, whatever it brought you, please share it with others. We love hearing what you find the most helpful so we can guide more conversation this way. So please share your thoughts, insights, because you learn once by listening, you learn twice by sharing. So by sharing, you learn even more and process all this information. So please share anything that you found helpful. And thanks again, everyone. And until next time, bye.
Bye, everyone.